Well, we're going to be try to be short and sweet today in honor of Thich Nhat Hanh. He was a guy who, one of his great quotes from a book actually that Vivienne put me onto. I have 19 Thich Nhat Hanh books on the shelf, and one of them is called "Silence: The Power of Quiet in a World Full of Noise." And uh, our friend from France, Vivienne, put me onto that one. It was quite a good one. And in that book, he says, I'm going to give you a couple quotes from that book. Uh, he said, "Thundering silence is eloquent and powerful. Thundering silence is eloquent and powerful." Yeah, he had a different idea of silence than we have. We have the idea of silence as before you say something or after you say something, but he had a different idea about that. Uh, Another quote, he said, and this is sort of this different idea that will hopefully will grow as we grow as a community, as we go deeper into silence as a community. He said in that book also, he said, realize that silence comes from your heart and not from the absence of talk. That's a beautiful way to look at it, especially to give you a little bit of view on our third forum here, where we go into a kind of silence, a word in silence dance uh, in our Quaker meeting at the end, and to remember that silence, to realize that silence comes from your heart and not from the absence of talk. When a guy like Thich Nhat Hanh speaks to you, the silence deepens. It's not about the absence of talk or the absence of noise. It's something that emanates from your heart, and that's uh, one of the pictures in the screensaver thing was he gave a talk, "Open the Door of the Heart." Yeah, and maybe just a third remembrance. Um, there's a picture where Thich Nhat Hanh came to Gethsemane and met Merton. Merton is sort of the Forrest Gump of spirituality. Just about everybody wanted to meet Merton or did meet Merton. And so it was early in the 60s when Thich Nhat Hanh was fleeing from Vietnam. Both of the North Vietnamese and the South Vietnamese had him on the enemy death list. They both thought he was working for the other side. And so he had to leave to survive. And he said, "Well, I'm not for the North. I'm not for the South. I'm for the center," which is beautiful. I mean, that's what we're trying to work on. And he really was. He would help anybody who was suffering, whether they were Viet Cong or South, or just if you were hurt, he was helping you, and that was his order that he started. But he had to flee and pretty much live in the West, uh, mostly in France, until he had a kind of brain hematoma about 9 years ago, where he caused him to have a stroke, and he lost this part of the left brain uh, that has speech. And he was gratefully allowed to finally come back and spend his last days at his original monastery in Vietnam. And he didn't have language. He lost that part of the left brain, but he never lost his center, because the center's not up here. Center's here, you see. So he still managed to communicate with gesture and mostly with presence and smiling. He never lost his smile. Maybe the smile comes from the center. So anyway, that's a little bit of a homage to this guy. If you haven't read any Thich Nhat Hanh, or you don't really know much about him, I would recommend this book. It's a little hard to see on this, but the title is easy to remember. 4 words: No Death, comma, No Fear. It's not only, I think, one of his best, but it's like it's Buddhism 101, 201, 301, 401. You can learn everything you need to know about Buddhism in this book. And I bought this book for a woman who had 6 months to live of cancer. Some of you know Mary Lucan. And this was the last book she was reading, and she just got so much out of it. She said, it's like listening to a flower talk, she said. Yeah. So No Death, No Fear. Great book. When you want to learn a little bit more about Buddhism or just resonate with this particular brand of Buddhism that Thich Nhat Hanh had. We heard in the beginning the Dalai Lama doing the Bodhisattva vow. Well, perfect for Thich Nhat Hanh. He did his version of it, I'm sure, in Vietnamese, but they live it, both of those guys, two great lights. We're lucky to still have the Dalai Lama with us. But I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh, like Merton, he wrote about 100 books. Yeah, so they're all out there. I've got 19 of them. Don't really need any more at this point. But one, No Death, No Fear. Great book to get. Great book to get. Okay. Well, a short poem in honor of Thich Nhat Hanh, but also just coming out of the weeks sitting with me. It's called Smothering God. And the image of smothering God came to me in a retreat some years ago from one of my fellow pilgrims. It goes like this. Words, 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 Hamlet sighed. We smother God with words as our souls cry out for a carefully tended silence. Words, 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 Hamlet sighed. We smother God with words as our souls cry out for a carefully tended silence, with plenty of space for grace and for new arrivals, bearing what is hidden as a gift to one and all. Words, 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 Hamlet sighed. If you know Hamlet, he was probably a 6 on the Enneagram, classic 6 on the Enneagram, and he kept trying to go into action, but never could quite go into action because he had more thoughts about it. To be or not to be is the classic one, but he was always, well, yeah, but then on the other hand, so in words, and he, at one point he just he said, words, words, words. And words are beautiful. Words, I'm a poet. Jesus was a poet. Thich Nhat Hanh was a poet. We love words, but they can smother God. Too many words. That's why I want to go short today and get us right to the silence. Then we'll come back with a few more. We smother God with words. Theology. Oh my God. I remember my theology classes at Notre Dame. They were the worst. They weren't my best classes just because all the jargon, all the verbiage, and you could never. I didn't have any grasp on God. I'm totally smothered by books and stuff. Yet our souls cry out. The souls are that part of us who want that connection with the transcendent, whatever you call the transcendent. The souls are made for that. And so the soul never rests until it somehow can break through and like tune in. It's the frustration of being in an old pickup with a bad radio, trying to tune in a station. All you get is like a lot of static, and then every once in a while, a little bit of music. Well, the soul is, in all of us, is trying to tune in all the time to that, I don't know what the station name would be for the transcendent, but there probably is one. Our souls cry out for a carefully tended silence. We have to tend our silence. I mean, when Jill was letting you guys in, I dashed back next door to put a little more wood in the wood stove. Pam was listening to her Mass of the Air in the back room, and I didn't want her to come out and be cold. So if you have a wood stove, you have to tend it. You have to just feed it. Carmela knows what I'm talking about. And so you carefully tend to Woodstock. Well, you have to carefully tend silence in our culture because it's so rare and so easily overrun with incoming noise, incoming emails, Facebook, all the things that get in the way of silence that just make us sort of noisy. Neil Postman, who's a culture critic in the 80s, he had a book in 1985 that's still in print. And the title was Amusing Ourselves to Death. It's still in print now, and it's worth a read because especially if you dipped into, as I mentioned last week, into Don't Look Up, a kind of bitter satire on how distracted we all are, so distracted that we could even not notice a meteor hurtling towards Earth. Don't Look Up. If you watch that movie, there most of the time people are looking at their phones. They don't have the ability to look up and see what's right in front of them. So we have to be careful and tend our silence. In this, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the second half of the talk. But silence is important. And I don't know about you, but I come to sit in a group of people and feel the silence of all your presence. I need this silence. I don't know about you, but the silence with 30 or 40 people. Today, I think we have like 48, almost 50 people here. The silence and the presence of almost 50 people sitting in silence together, that's powerful. Martin needed it for 25 years. He was in community and then could go off by himself. So this is something important to tend it, to tend the silence with plenty of space for grace and for new arrivals. That was my motto and still is the motto of Loose Leaf Hollow. The only thing I knew for sure when I really had no idea what I was going to be doing 20 years ago was that I was going to create a space for grace, that grace could get through. I'm still holding to that, although the form of how I work has changed with, now we're working virtual, very few people coming in person. It's still the same, to create a kind of virtual space for grace and for new arrivals. If you have space and you have silence, new things can come in. New things can come in. There are new arrivals. And often these surprises that come through in the silence are bearing what is hidden. They come up lots of times from your own unconscious. They've been waiting there. Well, just enough silence, and then something can come up. And sometimes it's shocking, sometimes it's surprising. Doesn't matter. These are, what is hidden as a gift to one and all, because it's not just your gift. When these things come, it's coming for one and all. Okay, and we do in our third movement of our meditation here at Heart to Heart, we share our gifts as they come to us. And but first of all, the gift of holding the silence is the big gift. Now, one last quote from Thich Nhat Hanh that will to lead us into the sitting. When he first met Merton at the monastery, one of the monks, Merton was expecting him, but he was in his room writing or something, and Thich Nhat Hanh came a monk brought him to the door, and the monk knocked 3 times, which is how you did it at that time. And Merton said, "Enter," which is how you do. You didn't say "come in," you'd say "enter." This was the whole monastic form. And so then Thich Nhat Hanh opened the door, smiling, and then turned around and closed the door without making a sound. Merton wrote that night, he wrote an essay called Thich Nhat Hanh is My Brother. And he said, "When I saw the way the man closed the door, I knew he was already enlightened." And Merton made some comment about it. like about where did you learn to close the door like that? You know, because people sort of bang things around. And Thich Nhat Hanh said something Merton wrote down. He said, before you meditate, you have to close the door. Before you meditate, you have to close. You have to learn how to close the door. Before you meditate, you have to learn how to close the door. And that's really what we're doing. That's really what we're doing when we segue to just going into the contemplative silence. We're more and more learning how to close the door on all the noise for a while, to close the door on doing, and then to drop into the heart. So with that, we'll do a little breathing and we'll head into the silence.